What's up guys, Sean16 here with another Here's What I'm Thinking video, and today I want to discuss Aunt May from the MCU Spider-Man films, played by Marisa Tomei, who should have deserved better in the films and what could have been done to improve her character. Now before I start to break all this down, I want you all to know that there's going to be major spoilers from Spider-Man No Way Home, so if you haven't seen it, which would be strange because it's been well over a month since it's been out, I advise you to stop watching this video now to avoid spoilers and come back to it later and, go see the movie. But if you have seen it or you simply don't give a shit about spoilers, that's awesome. Let's get into it. So the reason why I'm making this video stems from a Twitter post I read about a day after I saw No Way Home. I can't really remember what the post read, but it was along the lines of criticizing the Aunt May role that didn't serve a lot of importance to the trilogy and was often used for sex appeal. That had me thinking for a moment, and when I look back on all the films she was in, the user kinda had a point. I mean, in 2016, when Captain America Civil War happened, there was a lot of talk and attention on how hot and young Aunt May looked. Some liked it, some didn't. I was somewhere in between, but later appreciated it. Aunt May's presence in Civil War, Homecoming, and Far From Home, she was kinda there as sex appeal and comedic relief by the suggestive dialogue and attitude she gave off in some of the scenes she was in. It didn't feel right for the character. Aunt May is one of the most inspirational characters from Spider-Man lore. She's the aunt to our hero Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. She's a caretaker, a mother figure, caring, devoted, stern and stubborn at times, but is wise and can be calm and patient. In Spider-Man tradition, May Parker is simply an elder widow woman who tries to provide and take care of her teenage nephew Peter while he grows up and transitions into adulthood. Peter, being Spider-Man, often kept his identity a secret from anyone close to him, specifically his aunt, assuming she would freak out, and it has been proven that she has freaked out of, him being Spider-Man, going out every night, fighting bad guys, almost getting himself killed while he does it. I mean, shit, I'd be scared too. In the movies, we've seen 3 actresses portray the aunt to Spider-Man. Rosemary Harris being the first from the Raimi movies, Sally Fields is from the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and currently, she's the current Aunt May, but she's dead. I don't fucking know. She's not current Aunt May anymore, she's dead. And currently Marisa Tomei from the MCU Spider-Man films. Each take on the character is both different and similar based on the actress's performance. In the Raimi Spider-Man films, Aunt May is portrayed as a caring, stern, but most importantly, a wise and patient elderly woman. Rosemary Harris did a fantastic job portraying the character. She even looks like the Aunt May from the early comics. Her best moments in the Raimi films are referred to the unique sets of dialogue and quotes she delivered. Like her quote from Spider-Man 2 of having a hero to believe in helps keep people steady and gives them strength. And in Spider-Man 3, she had quoted that dark and hatred is like a poison that could take over and turn you to something ugly. Soon after the cancellation of Raimi's Spider-Man 4 came along the rebooted The Amazing Spider-Man, and Sally Fields became the new Aunt May, and she had big shoes to fill when Aunt May was such a staple in the Raimi films. Aunt May in the Amazing Spider-Man films was slightly younger. She was still old, but she wasn't as old as Raimi's Aunt May, that, no offense, looked like she could have been Peter's grandma than his aunt. This time around, Aunt May looks the appropriate age and depiction of what a person may think an aunt would look like. Aunt May in the Amazing Spider-Man films is what I would describe as a person who's afraid of the outside world. She's devoted and caring, but cautious, worried, and filled with anxieties, but that's just my point of view. Sally Fields' performance as Aunt May is criminally underrated, in my opinion. Though she stated she didn't like the role, she was good at portraying this particular version of Aunt May that felt so grounded and realistic, where it wasn't too far off from the comics. If anything, I think she resembled a bit of the personality of the Aunt May from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. Then, after the Amazing Spider-Man films got canceled, just canceling these Spider-Man movie projects left and right, the series was rebooted again, but into the MCU with a much younger looking Aunt May, being played by Marissa Tomei. The moment Aunt May was on screen in Captain America Civil War, people couldn't get over how hot and attractive this version of Aunt May was. But it was a problem to the fans of the comics. But it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not everything is going to be comically accurate. Get a grip. Aunt May in the MCU is a devoted, fun-loving, naive, middle-aged aunt that looks like she could be Peter's biological mother. Marissa Tomei as Aunt May was a controversial choice, but honestly a good one. Her performance is good, but again, it could have been better if the writers gave her more to do with the role. It also helps to see that each Aunt May does have their own story arc in the respective films. Aunt May in the Raimi trilogy probably has the best arc in all the Spider-Man films for the character. Her arc of loss and trying to keep herself steady through the mental pain, where in the end, she found peace through forgiveness. In the Amazing Spider-Man films, May's arc was that she goes through grief and loss in order to build a stronger bonding connection with her nephew Peter. In the MCU Spider-Man films, Aunt May's arc is not that thought of because of her limited presence and importance to the story, and time skips such as the moment where Aunt May found out that Peter was Spider-Man and said, "What the f-?" Then snap 5 years, things are chill with no explanation, but it is suggested that there was a serious talk about it in No Way Home. Where's the consistency, damn it? But if you can piece together any moment and scene, her arc can be summed up as her encouraging Peter to be Spider-Man, to do good things no matter the cost. I do appreciate that John Watts, Sony, and the creative team tried to give something for Marissa Tomei to do in No Way Home. Marissa Tomei's best performance as Aunt May is in No Way Home, but damn it, did it really have to be where she died? Basically making her the MCU version of Uncle Ben, using the "with great power" quote, and yet at the same time it makes sense for her death scene considering Peter's story arc of the Homecoming trilogy being his origin story. But her death to me was kinda devastating to watch at first, because Peter at that moment just lost the last of his family. From his eyes, more than his aunt, but like his mother who raised him most of his life and took care of him. Although being careless about his safety later after finding out he was Spider-Man, but that's besides the point. But morally, Peter lost the last thing that kept him close to home, where in the end, he now journeys alone. Aunt May's death can be looked at as one of the most well-performed moments of Marissa Tomei's career, as well as a memorable moment in Spider-Man cinema history, no doubt. But then, however, when you look at her entire story arc, it's not the best type of storytelling, you know what I mean? She was barely remembered for any moment in the films. Like, name a moment to you where it felt like Aunt May had a significant impact on the story. And I swear, if you say it's the moment, that just says Aunt May is more comedic relief because they made it like a joke. But tell me, from the top of your head, what was the importance of her character outside the obvious is that she's Spider-Man's aunt? What we as fans come to expect is from the legacy and reputation that was built from the many adaptations of the character over the years. To see her die, her memorable moment will be that, which is why I wish she was better written prior to No Way Home to care about her character more like I did with previous Aunt May actresses. When looking back on her death, as devastating as it wasn't on that level of like Iron Man's death in Avengers Endgame, since that was an 11-year arc of build-up of Tony Stark's life of being Iron Man and seeing what he had to go through. Not even in comparison towards Aunt May's death in Spider-Man PS4, mainly because it doesn't. It did it first. It did her death first. Within one game, one appearance, she was more memorable than the MCU Aunt May because she gave me Raimi Aunt May vibes. But look, I get it. She sacrificed herself to save Peter, even though it was a battle she wouldn't have won because it's Green fucking Goblin, but she was trying to protect her nephew, the last of her family. That's good storytelling and development for the character. It just bothers me to think she wasn't that important to the story of the Homecoming trilogy until the last one. Again, she was just there with no importance other than being Peter's sexy aunt, or Peter's sexy aunt, or however way you want to say it. Aunt May had potential. When I look at Homecoming, I see that this was a good adaptation of Aunt May. She wasn't heavily involved, but she did have her moments where Marissa Tomei shined as Aunt May. The interactions between Peter and Aunt May worked for that film. The scene where Peter is getting dressed for the Homecoming dance was a nice moment between an aunt and her nephew. And the scene after Tony strips Peter of his Spider-Man suit, Peter comes home and Aunt May berates him out of worry. That scene right there felt right. I feel like a worrying Aunt May is a key trait to the character, because her worry is out of love and care for Peter for his health and his safety. Homecoming felt like a nice jumping point in May's story arc, but I feel like when Far From Home, Far From Home. Okay, yeah, it was the worst adaptation of Aunt May yet. It really took a dive of where she would go and do. She is reduced to a much smaller role than in Homecoming, having May doing a will they won't they shit with Happy Hogan, being careless with Peter's identity when she packed his Spider-Man suit in his suitcase and almost got him busted on his school trip. Then, when it comes to No Way Home, she's more aware of how serious the situation is, but she is kinda blunt and naive in terms of convincing Peter to help his multiversal villains that would later turn on him, obviously, leading up to her death. So now the question is, what could have been done in order to have a better adaptation for Aunt May in the MCU? For starters, the character should have been a mix between Rosemary Harris and Sally Fields' performances of Aunt May from past Spider-Man films. She should have had the wiseness and sternness of Rosemary's Aunt May and the worrying and cautious nature of Sally Fields' Aunt May. As for the story, more tweaks should have been made to flesh out the character. Starting off with her debut in Civil War, I believe May should have been a bit more cautious and overprotecting of Peter when Tony Stark showed up at her door and told her about Peter being accepted into the Stark internship program. The fact that May didn't know about it should have been suspicious to her from the jump. What if May refused Peter to go because of school? The excuse Peter tried to use on Tony Stark originally, but it's May acknowledging it here. Maybe she doesn't want Peter to go because she'll get lonely and worried, still mourning Uncle Ben's death from months prior. If there is an Uncle Ben that is still waiting on Spider-Man freshman year to shed some light on that, Peter acknowledges to May it may be a good opportunity for him. Knowing Peter's eagerness, she allows him to go. Now, the post-credits scene in Civil War that features Peter and May, I think it should be slightly tweaked, where May is more concerned about Peter having bruises on his face, from being in that airport fight. She asks Peter if the guy that beat him up had a name so she could charge him for assault. But, it's Captain America. Peter lies and says he doesn't know. So now we're at Homecoming. Again, I felt Aunt May's character was fine. I think one minor change that could be made is where May walks in on Peter and Ned and Peter is in his underwear. The scene itself could still be comedic, like May walks in, sees Peter in his boxers, asks him, "What are you doing?" Peter says, "Nothing." Then May asks, "Why aren't you wearing any clothes?" Peter says, "He was just changing," where May still questions it, asking why is he changing in front of Ned. Peter claims Ned's fine with it, where Ned, who's still shook from finding out Peter is Spider-Man, acknowledges he's fine with it. Awkward silence for a moment, and then have the scene play out normally with May suggesting to go out to eat. Now that I mention it, I think another thing I'd like to see changed is that dinner scene with Peter and May. That part where the waiter gives free food to May because she's attractive was not needed, so I cut that part out of the movie. Maybe replace it with an additional scene like, I'd say May asking how the Stark internship program is going for Peter, or Maybe mentioning that the Chinese restaurant they're eating in used to be popular when she was around Peter's age. Could even say she's gone on a date with Ben to the place. That's pretty much what I would have had changed for Aunt May's character in Homecoming. Before I get into Far From Home, I want to address Avengers Endgame and the 5-year blip plot. Along with Peter, May was also blipped when Thanos erased half of existence. What I would have had changed is that Aunt May never got blipped. That way, it adds more to the emotional trauma and distress she feels that we've never seen before. And she blames Tony Stark and the Avengers for Peter's supposed death, which could be a reference of its own to the Ultimate Spider-Man Death of Peter Parker comic issue, where Aunt May lashed out at Captain America during Peter's funeral, blaming him and the Avengers for Peter's death. I say within those 5 years, May got a job at the Feast shelter. She's alone, no husband, no nephew. Working at Feast could help distract her, keep herself busy during a rough time in her life, just like everyone else affected by the blip. She could also be in a relationship with someone like Happy, where yes, I know the relationship was in Far From Home, but because it's been 5 years, I'd say they've been on and off because Aunt May considers their relationship as a fling, like she did in Far From Home anyway, and or she could be afraid of getting close in terms of relationship due to her loss of her late husband and her nephew. From that point on, have things play out the way they do, all the way till after the final battle, where we get to see our heroes returning to their lives, like Peter reuniting with Ned at school. I'd hate to do this because I really like that scene, but instead of that scene, I'd replace it with Peter reuniting with Aunt May. So here's how I kind of see the scene playing out. Aunt May is working at Feast and she sees Peter come through the door. Aunt May is overwhelmed with tears and emotion to see her nephew after 5 years being gone, and she gives him a long emotional hug and the two cry in relief. The events of Endgame changed May, where she's more afraid and concerned about Peter being Spider-Man, but still allows him to be because it's his responsibility. Now, in Far From Home, what wouldn't I have had changed? I didn't really like how that Aunt May was portrayed in it, so here's a new pitch. Following the events of Endgame where she wasn't blipped, Aunt May is uneasy and unsure about Peter being Spider-Man. When Peter is packing for his trip and refuses to take his suit, May agrees that he shouldn't because she believes he deserves a break from being Spider-Man, instead of enabling Peter to take it with him. Now sure, without the Stark suit, it would change the meeting Mysterio scene a bit, but Peter's only in the Stark suit once and, well, I'm wrong. He's actually in it twice, when he meets Mysterio and then the Mysterio illusion scene. But, you know, just for the meeting Mysterio scene alone, I'd say Peter could be wearing a hoodie to hide his identity for just that scene alone. Another thing I would like to add is that the fact that because there were monsters showing up on Peter's trip should have had May be concerned about Peter's safety, where she could be constantly calling Peter to make sure he was okay. And there could be a scene, I'd say, after Peter passes out on a train and he's put in jail in Germany. May is visibly worried and scared about Peter's whereabouts, showing signs of PTSD. Happy tries to calm her down, but that's when May slightly lashes out at Happy, stating how she lost Peter the first time from the blip, even referencing Uncle Ben. But then Happy gets a call from Peter and asks him to come get him. May takes the phone from Happy, asks Peter if he's okay, and Peter says he really messed up and doesn't know what to do, because Mysterio tricked him and is about to attack London. Hearing Peter is in trouble and is unsure of himself made May relate to that feeling of uncertainty and being unsure of herself when the blip happened and she lost Peter, but she managed to keep herself going by helping people at Feast. And that's what Peter does despite how dangerous it is. He helps people. She finally composes herself and reassures him, telling him Happy is coming to get him and he'll figure it out how to stop Mysterio and save the people. Have the scene transition to Peter walking through the field of flowers, and everything else plays out the same. With Peter defeating Mysterio, Aunt May fully accepts Peter as Spider-Man. As scared as she is of losing him again, She believes in him to do what's right no matter the cost. One more thing. As much as I ranted on it earlier, I'd say keep the comedic relief and tone of Aunt May and Happy Hogan dating, but add a twist where Peter asks if May and Happy are dating. Happy says they are, May says they're just good friends, but Aunt May does reveal that she is dating. And it's a woman. Shocking Happy. This idea is based on Marissa Tomei's recent comments on wanting Aunt May to have a girlfriend in No Way Home. Same scene plays out with Peter leaving for his date as May and Happy discuss their relationship. And finally, with No Way Home, not much I would change. I thought No Way Home gave us the best of Aunt May's character, but I have a few suggestions. Firstly, coming off Far From Home and May having a girlfriend, I feel like with all the controversies surrounding Peter being revealed as Spider-Man and is accused of murdering Mysterio, could have led to issues in May's relationship with her girlfriend. Another thing I'd have changed is the scene where May is being interrogated by the police at the police station and is being questioned for allowing her nephew, who's a minor, to go out to fight crime, putting himself in danger. May pleads she knows it's wrong of her to let Peter fight crime where he could get hurt or killed. She wanted him to stop a few times before because she lost him once when Thanos snapped half of existence, but explains that all Peter wanted to do was to help people, wanted to save people. It took her a while to accept that, but she trusts him to be the type of person to do what's right. She further explains that what happened in London, the attack, Mysterio's murder by the hand of Spider-Man, was not true. Though she was not there, she knows that Peter wouldn't kill, not even his worst enemy. Throw in reference to Peter saving Vulture, aka Adrian Toomes, in Homecoming. From that point on, have everything play out the way it does to her death and to Peter being on his own in the end. With all the tweaks and changes I made to her story arc from Civil War to No Way Home, her final act really does come full circle and has a lot more meaning when she dies. So to sum up her idealistic story arc I made, May's arc is like Peter's story arc, understanding responsibilities, what it means to do the right thing, and the price that comes with it. May's arc revolved around her accepting that Peter is Spider-Man, and that people will need a hero like him because of who he is. Although she's scared of losing him, she can't help but be proud of him for what he tries to do despite all the obstacles he faces. Her death has more meaning when she tries to go up against the Green Goblin, when he was trying to kill Peter. Her fear of losing Peter encourages her to save not just her nephew, but her boy, her son, the person she couldn't save when he blipped from existence at the end of Infinity War. She put herself in harm's way and sacrificed herself, similar to how Tony Stark sacrificed to save all of humanity in Endgame, but his reasoning was because of Peter and wanting to bring him back. May gives her words of wisdom of with great power, there must also come great responsibility moments before she died, thus ending her arc. And that's what I would have wanted to see, a fully fleshed out story arc for Aunt May. But we got what we got in the end. But I hope my fan story arc kind of brings some closure to anyone that loved the Aunt May character from the MCU, pondering, well, what if? All in all, the MCU did Aunt May dirty in their Spider-Man trilogy. Aunt May was simply badly written and uncared for, so much so that you had the actress herself, Marissa Tomei, say nobody cares about her character just days before the release of No Way Home. Foreshadowing. They barely gave her anything to do with the character because the story was so wrapped around Peter, his high school friends, and the Avengers, specifically Iron Man. They couldn't put enough attention or focus towards more of his home life to give Aunt May much to do. I like that she's a bit more involved in No Way Home and has a moment to shine, but unfortunately it had to be that moment when she died, didn't it? Which is why I say the MCU did May dirty. In conclusion, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May was a fine choice in my opinion, but the direction she was given was bad and she deserved better. We could have had the best version of that character to date. I feel bad for Marissa Tomei not being given more to do with the Aunt May character. Maybe in the Disney Plus show Spider-Man Freshman Year, that's basically Spider-Man's real origin story, or as I like to call it, Spider-Man's pre-origin before his origin. I know that sounds stupid. Don't judge me. Don't at me. But his origin story nonetheless, set before the events of Captain America Civil War, it could finally shed some light and reestablish Aunt May as a character, but we'll just have to wait and see. Plus, maybe we get Uncle Ben at last. Yes, I'm going to reference that again because I really want to see Uncle Ben. Did he have an importance to why Peter becomes Spider-Man? I would love to know. Because you got people online debating on if Uncle Ben actually existed at all. Sure, you got the suitcase from Far From Home that Peter took on his trip. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. I want to see a physical appearance of Uncle Ben. I really do. Can only hope. But that's all I gotta say about MCU Aunt May, who deserved better as a character. So if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, comment your thoughts about Aunt May and what you think. Did she deserve better? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Look me up on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm also now on TikTok too. A link will be in the description. But as always, I will see you next time. Woo! Made it! Made it! It took me a month, but I fucking did it. Fuck yes.